Hello and welcome. This is video number 2 in a three-part series about fascism. In today's video, we're going to take a look at Adolf Hitler and who he was and what his beliefs were and how he emerged as a leader for the Nazi Party. I hope you'll find this helpful and informative. Let's get started. Well, first of all, I'll go ahead and just say there is so much stuff that you can say and talk about regarding Adolf Hitler and the rise of the Nazis. I'm certainly not going to be able to speak to all of that today. So I'm going to just try to touch on some of the basics, some of the main points. And if this is a topic that interests you, which often this is a topic and an individual that interests students, there are loads of resources around that you can find more information on. But like I said, we'll focus on the basics. So where I want to start is basically going back to the World War I years. Adolf Hitler was a person who was technically born in Austria. He fought for Germany during World War I, and even though he didn't really rise through the ranks very much, he was very committed to the effort. In fact, when the war was over, he was devastated to find out that Germany had surrendered. He was actually in a hospital at the time. He had suffered some blindness from fighting that he'd been involved with, and again was very devastated when the war came to an end with Germany surrendering. And so he was pretty upset by that moving forward. When the war was done, he ended up living in the city of Munich, and kind of began to wander a bit, wander with an A. Not really sure of his place, not really sure of his purpose, but one thing he was sure of is he was very bitter and angry and hateful about the outcome of World War I. While in Munich, he would come to associate with a small group of people, at least small at that time, that would evolve into what we know of as the Nazi Party. The name that they would come to take in its full name is the National Socialist German Workers' Party. And among other things, they were intent on trying to fix the problems of the Treaty of Versailles and basically make Germany what Germany should be. And that's kind of where they got started. What we see emerge over the next couple of years is this relatively small group, pretty specific to the Munich area, grow in number. The number of people that became interested in them and became supportive of them did grow. A lot of people refer to the Nazis as fascists, maybe not exactly the same as the original fascists of Italy, but kind of their own version of fascism. One of the things we looked at with Mussolini is he had a group of people that would be used to be a force element to kind of threaten or intimidate opposition. They were the black shirts for Mussolini. Hitler and the Nazis had their own group. They were called the brown shirts, and they served the same basic purpose. So one thing that's kind of hard to know for sure with the rise of groups like the Nazis in Germany is how much support they had actually, or how much of it was people just trying to get out of the way to try to not be hurt by them. Because certainly if people are threatening you with violence, it would make sense if at least a fair number of people would choose to not push back against that. At any rate, whether they had whatever true support they had and whatever they had of people just trying to get out of the way, as the first few years went by, they did begin to slowly but surely grow a bit of a following. Now, as that was taking place, Hitler would emerge as a leader for this group. He seemed to have a real knack for organizing the things that needed to be organized to make their group work and have an impact. He also seemed to have a real knack for speaking. Whenever he talked about something, people listened. There was a clear passion to what he had to say, and it was captivating. And maybe even if you didn't agree with anything he was saying, it was still, he had the way that would just kind of pull you in, and if nothing else, you would give it attention. And one of the things that I guess maybe one of the big steps for the Hitler and the Nazis early in their process of developing was in 1923. They were at that point had been inspired by Mussolini's March on Rome, and they decided they too were going to try to seize control of the German government. And in the city of Munich, they engaged in what was ended up being referred to as the beer hall push. Push is a German word for coup, which is the French word for a quick seizure of power. And it's almost hard to describe how badly this attempt to overthrow the German government failed. A beer hall in Germany would be just kind of like going to a restaurant, almost maybe even think like a sports bar. And essentially what happened is Hitler basically jumped up on a table. So imagine somebody at a sports bar jumping up on a table and saying, we've controlled the key things we need to control. We're taking over the government of the United States today. Well, basically, what happened in for Hitler in the beer hall he was in, as he jumped up, he made those statements. People kind of looked at him, and then basically went back to what they were doing. It was really a kind of an embarrassing failure, and this was an illegal act that he engaged in, and so he was arrested and would be put on trial. This is where you might think things would end, but in a lot of ways, it was almost the beginning. As you can see, the next section is labeled Hitler Gains Support. So basically, what happened was he was arrested, and because Germany was now operating with a democratic style government, they had a judicial system that was not the same as what was in the United States, but the kind of thing where you wouldn't just get arrested and thrown in jail, but you would have a trial and go through a procedure to get to that point. And at this point, not that many people outside of the Munich area within Germany knew much about Hitler or the Nazis. But this was an interesting thing that had happened. And so there was a lot of news publications that reported on the trial and had information about what was going on in the newspapers. And basically what Hitler was able to do was use the opportunity of being on trial to share what he and the Nazis believed. And the reality was a lot of people were sympathetic to the views that they had, because many people throughout Germany, if not most people throughout Germany, were upset with what had happened after World War I, and were upset with the Treaty of Versailles, and were to a degree upset with the current government. So he had a sympathetic ear. And one of the things that happened through the trial process is people throughout Germany got to learn who Hitler and the Nazis were. Well, even though there was quite a bit of sympathy for him, he still was found guilty, and he did spend time in jail. But he would certainly take advantage of his time in jail to write a significant document, especially for getting to know who he was and who the Nazis were, a book called Mein Kampf, which when you translate that, it means my struggle. And basically what you see in this book is the whole plan and all of the ideas that Hitler and the Nazis would have. So one thing, anyone who read that book, if they would have believed that it was meant to be 100% true, should have not been surprised by anything that would happen over the next decade or two. It was all in the book. Now, there was a lot to what was in the book, but just to highlight some of the ideas or beliefs that were expressed in his story that would become consistent with Nazi ideology. They certainly talked about a master race of people. He used the term Aryan, which really isn't even a real thing. So basically, he was almost talking about like a mythical idea of a perfect German. Nevertheless, through what he talked about, the perception of blonde-haired, blue-eyed, strong, tall people, that was representative of the perfect German, and that basically anybody who didn't fit that profile was inferior and did not have a place in Germany. So basically, anybody who didn't fit the idea of the strong, perfect German was at risk. Now, Jews in particular were a group specifically targeted. Much of the blame for any problems Germany had experienced, both past, present, and future, would be blamed on Jews. But basically anybody that was viewed as different or somehow lesser than was at risk with Nazi ideology. Also in the book, it talked a lot about the Versailles Treaty, which definitely resonated with anyone who read the book, because most people didn't like a lot of what the Versailles Treaty was about. Something else that was talked about was the need for Lebensraum. That's a term meaning living space. He felt that the German people needed more territory to live and thrive in. So again, as things take shape in the late 30s, getting into the World War II years, it should have been no surprise to anybody that Germany would seek out territory the way they did. Well, I hope that is helpful for you, knowing a little bit more about who Hitler was, where he came from, and what his ideas were. Hopefully, you'll join me in the next video where we'll talk about some of the efforts uh, to then actually take control of Germany and what that started to look like as the Nazis gained greater control. Thanks for watching.